everyone, and welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today is December 15th, and the holiday season is well underway. No matter which holiday you tend to celebrate, this does tend to be a time of year where people exchange gifts, and naturally, our loved ones may want to give us gifts that support our hobby. It's also possible that you may want to buy airsoft-related gifts for others if you're not a Grinch, others on your list. And in either case, gifting a good airsoft gift can be trickier than it appears. So today, Pat and I are going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that you can ensure your Christmas gifts are a big hit. And we'll also talk about some of the ones maybe we received along the way that weren't exactly what we might have been looking for.
Naturally, I am coming from you live from the heap of coal I got last year. It serves me as my recording chair. In all seriousness, though, I've often gotten people who are on our Airsoft team gifts for Christmas, and typically gotten them Airsoft-related things. And that can be a bit complicated because, obviously, your price range on Airsoft gifts tends to be on the high end if you're thinking guns and things like that, and I'm not that wealthy.
And it also, I think, it depends on a couple of other things, too. Like, obviously, if you and the person you're gifting or getting a gift from are very well acquainted, you may know specifically what that person needs. I remember one year we did a Christmas like a Secret Santa kind of deal where you don't really know who you're buying. You know who you're buying for, but you don't know who you're going to get a gift from. And the person who's gifting me a gift was Jason Fong on our team. And Jason got me an SHS motor because he knew that I needed a motor for my airsoft gun. But that's a very specific use case. I think if you're talking about like family members or something like that, they're not going to know those intricate details. And quite likely they're not going to care. So I think that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is it really depends on the experience of the player, right? So if you're just starting airsoft, every single thing that someone is going to give you is going to be cool. Whereas
Absolutely.
if you're more experienced, you've been playing for many years, like yourself and myself, Pat, we kind of already know what we like, right? So if you give me something that is not that is meant to be like my mainline kit or whatever, I'm not necessarily going to use it because I already know what I like. Now let me try it out. I might discover that I like it better, but the likelihood of that happening, I would say, is pretty low, right?
Yeah, and that doesn't really cause problems in some ways. It just means that we're talking also about, what do you get for the Airsofter who has everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah.
Or at least who has their kit pretty squared away. And, so if you luck out and one of your gun techs happens to be buying you the part you need for your gun, then sweet, right? That's Merry Christmas. But that isn't always going to be the case. So what are some good Christmas gifts? I'll be honest and say I think that the sort of like slightly nicer $10 airsoft speed loader is a great stocking stuffer or a great like small Christmas gift for someone. Partly because maybe you guys are kinder to your stuff, but we break them more regularly than I would like to admit. The $10 ones are, it's one of those cases where you go, oh man, it's twice as much as the $5 one, but they are actually a lot nicer.
Yep.
They jam less for one, which is definitely a positive. And they're not disposable by any stretch, but there's certainly something that airsofters like both break and lose and can't find in the pile of kit and stuff. So having a couple of them lying around is wicked.
Yeah.
And yeah, like if, on the off chance that, someone's spouse is looking for a stocking stuffer or like, whatever, they're a really great, just like, oh yeah, that's cute. And like you can, wrap it in something so that it looks silly or offensive, whichever you prefer, which is, an added benefit.
Yeah, and I think too, like you just sort of touched on it, but like consumables are a good gift, right? So it's not necessarily super cool, but like it is super useful. So a bag of BBs, batteries, or even deployables like smoke grenades or pyro grenades if they're legal where you play. Those are can also all be great stocking stuffers. Although I wouldn't necessarily recommend putting the BBs in the stocking because that'll just haul it off your mantle. Um,
Yeah, there are problematic but entertaining things there.
those are all things that airsofters go through, and they're gonna get used. Like even for me, like if you got me like Milord's cheapest, finest BBs, right? Guess what? They're going in my grenade, right? So there's an they're gonna get used by the simple virtue of what they are. So those are not necessarily like cool things like if you're opening up presents on Christmas morning or whatever, and you just want to be wowed by something. You're not gonna be wowed by opening a pack of Mad Bull BBs, but it's gonna get used, right?
And I think the smoke grenades and the pyro is probably, to me, the best of those options in the sense that I'm cheap, and like they're a useful thing for sure, but I definitely seldom shell out for them.
Yeah,
And
agree.
so having a smoke grenade that I can toss is actually like a really enjoyable moment for me, just in it, like, oh, wicked, I get to use this. And so yeah, it's a pretty solid giggle worthy. I think they're usually around the $10 mark as well, actually. So that's pretty okay. I would probably be a little careful with buying BBs if you aren't buying for someone whose sort of like preferences in terms of brand of BBs and like weight of BBs and that sort of thing is something you're aware of. But I mean, in fairness, as Phil just noted, like if they're running a grenade launcher, man, I will feed whatever you give me into a 203 or into a tornado grenade.
Yeah, totally. And again, because they're consumables, they get used. I think another form of consumable really, and I mean, it's people don't really think about it as a consumable, but I think something that's really over the last few years, especially, I think makes a really good gift is comfort items, right? Like socks, gloves, base layers, warming layers, all that kind of stuff.
100%.
And it's funny because I remember being a kid and being like, "Oh, got socks for Christmas. That sucks." Now as an adult, I get socks and I'm like, "Yeah, dude, socks. This is awesome." My mom gave me a pair of running socks for my birthday, and I was over the moon. She's like, "Oh yeah, but that's not the main gift." I'm like, "I don't care. This is great. These are amazing." And
And
I, I think it's because they're the kind of things that most people not tend to buy for yourself. And so when someone buys them for you, you're like, oh, great, that's something I don't need to buy, right? But they are consumable. You go through them, and if you're playing airsoft every week, every couple of weeks, if you're wearing them outside of airsoft, they're gonna get used up, right?
totally. I mean, I have a couple of pairs of smart wool socks that are wicked for, hiking, playing airsoft, that sort of thing. And I honestly, I think I only own two pairs of them, and I get about two pairs a year as gifts around Christmas, and then destroy them because they're the only socks I wear. Like, like I wear them until they're no longer structurally sound. But I'm not clever enough to recognize that I should stop buying like 12 packs of terrible Costco socks and instead invest in more good ones.
For sure.
I'm not a bright boy some days, as it turns out.
Well, I mean, we'll forgive you for that. But I think when it
I
comes
mean, I hope you will at this point.
Yeah, it's true. But I think one of the things that's one of the main reasons why it doesn't happen is because good quality base layers like socks and the like can get pretty expensive, right? When you're looking at a pair of socks and it's like $40 or $50, you're like, am I really gonna spend that amount of money on a pair of socks? And they say that you should spend money where you spend time. If you're spending time in your socks every single day, then it's worthwhile for the investment. But that being said, it's really nice when someone else goes out of their way to buy it for you, I should say.
Especially because, if I'm being honest, like I'm way more likely to buy creature comforts for other people than I am to think to buy them for myself. Like junk food notwithstanding. I and it as I sit here sort of talking to you about it and like reflecting on it a little bit, like I would think nothing of buying a $40 pair of socks for my sister,
Yeah,
right? Like, other than, oh yeah, that's $40. I should think about how much, whether or not I can spend that right now. But, it's not, if I were getting my sister a gift and I was like, oh, these are really nice socks, she'll love them. Sure, no problem. But if I'm looking at the equivalent cost of sock, going, do I really need like comfy socks to wear for in my airsoft boots? I'll probably put them back. And that's perhaps foolish of me.
and we've talked about in the podcast before about how being comfortable on the airsoft field makes a big difference to your mindset. It makes a big difference to your ability to perform in situations where, if in other situations, if you are uncomfortable, you may not want to do the things that you need to do. So all of these things make it really worthwhile for you to have comfortable clothing when you're playing, and that goes for socks, but it also goes for all of your base layer. When you're thinking about the moisture wicking qualities of the clothing that you're wearing to help you control your temperature on the field to make sure you don't get overheated, or that you don't get too cold. Like all these things are very, very important.
And if you're playing airsoft in the winter, which we've talked about before, it is snowing outside right now and there's ice on the ground, so I'm pretty much it. No, I'm a big clumsy thing. I'll break my face, right? Which is a bummer, but there you go. The reality, if you are playing in winters, yeah, creature comforts are really almost become necessities really quickly when it's super cold out. Like I have hiked in the winter, I do camp in the winter, that sort of thing. And good base layers, good warming layers are tremendously important, and they're really honestly nice things to have. But like a lot of my I'm going to go shovel the driveway now gear started out as airsoft gear. To be honest, like it turns out I'm more likely to buy a Gore-Tex coat top layer for airsoft than I am to buy one to like walk to my car and then from my car into work.
And I mean, to build on that too, I think you're also more likely to play airsoft if you have a high degree of confidence in the gear that you have to help you deal with the climate that you're going to be playing on. I mean, I'll give you an adjacent example. So today, like Pat was hinting at, it was snowing all day, and around lunchtime, it was snowing. With not a lot of snow on the ground. But for my birthday, as I just mentioned, I had been gifted a pair of socks, and my mom had given me like a long sleeve uh, fleece warming layer that was windproof, moisture, all this kind of stuff. And I was actually looking forward to my run today because I knew that my equipment was good, that I was going to be nice and cozy while I went for this run, even though it was snowing. And so to apply that same logic to airsoft, I mean, if you are in a position where you have good gear that you know is going to keep you warm, then you're not going to hesitate to play in the winter if that's what you want to do, and vice versa in the summer. If you find that you're not overheating in your gear, you're more likely to get out there if it's 30 something degrees or more, right?
I mean, this tracks back to the don't play airsoft in the winter in desert boots side of the analogy. But getting back to sort of practical gift giving for the airsoft. If you're looking at people who play airsoft in the winter, I would say the like chemical or other hand warmers are really super useful.
Yeah, totally.
Because you tend to want, or at least we tend to want, lightweight gloves on your trigger finger, and man, oh man, do those hands get cold when it gets really chilly out. So having the hand warmers is great, and they're the practical value of them might be debatable, but the sort of aesthetic value of just the comfort of them is very, very high. And a good like thermos or mug to contain some sort of like hot liquid that'll keep it warm in really cold weather is not a terribly expensive gift. But if you're shopping for someone who spends any amount of time outside in the winter, hiking, or just being outdoors a lot, it's so good to be able to have tea or coffee that's actually hot, like a couple hours into your game.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't agree with that more. Um, Another thing that I think is worth sort of just tangentially coming off this topic into the next one. Another thing that makes a great gift is, I would say, airsoft adjacent items. Like Pat was talking about how when he goes to shovel snow, a lot of the gear that he wears is gear that started off as airsoft gear. I think if you look at this in the reverse, a lot of hiking or camping gear can make really good airsoft gifts. You think about, like, again, depending on the price point, but backpacks, hydration bladder, headlamps. These types of items can be really helpful, especially if the player you're buying for obviously is, an avid Milsim player, for example.
If you're buying from Milsim Player, remember to get a light that has a red lens setting.
Yeah, that's true. But ultimately, I think my point is, if you're going to be spending hours on end in the woods, good quality hiking or camping gear will have the durability that those types of players are looking for. And when you look at a lot of airsoft like repro gear, it really, I mean, Chris talked about that in the podcast, a few weeks ago. You know, if he's going to be spending a week in the woods, like repro gear is just going to fall apart. It doesn't have that durability that real camping gear will have, like good quality camping gear. And again, it can certainly be pretty expensive, so it's going to depend on who's buying it for you or who you're buying it for. Like Pat was saying, like $40 for, her his sister is one thing, but like if you're looking at a $200 backpack, that's a whole different purchase. But either way, there's a whole variety of different things that are available there. And one thing that I would really, really recommend is Gators. I know that uh, Jordan on the Discord is a really big fan of Gators. I have these outdoor research Gators that I've had for, I don't know, going on like 12 years, maybe 15 years, something like that. I used to wear them when I was walking to work every single day. I'd wear them playing airsoft. Gators are really, really good because they keep stuff out of your boots. They help keep your legs and your feet warm. They don't even necessarily need to be insulated. Like even windproof Gators is, wind and waterproof, I should say, is good enough. But it really makes a difference, and they're not that expensive. Like you're talking about, like $40 or somewhere around there. You can get a few cheaper ones. They're, for me, an essential. Yeah, they're just, for me, they're an essential piece of kit if you're going to be out there in humid conditions, like some sort of moisture, whether it's rain or whether it's snow or slush or whatever. And they're the kind of piece of kit, like Pat was saying, that you can wear outside of airsoft. Like I said, I'd walk to work wearing my Gators because that way I knew that if I got splashed by a car on my way there, I wouldn't necessarily need to change my whole outfit. Like I'd be okay, generally speaking.
Yep. And they're buy once, cry once, right? Unless you are in the sort of, 14-year-old still growing portion of our audience, like a good set of Gore-Tex pants, right, will run you maybe $80, but I have owned the same set of them since I achieved my current height of 6'2" in grade 10.
Yeah.
They have seen a lot of messing around in the snow and shoveling snow and all that, but they've also seen a lot of airsoft games just tossed on underneath my camo because it's really windy here. And being able to go, yeah, there's no wind. Awesome, right? No wind, and I don't care about the rain, even better.
And you know what? You just touched on something which I think we haven't really talked about, but I wanna address it. Is that a lot of these things, like when we were talking before about like comfort items like socks and like base layers and long johns or whatever. If you're going out there and you're buying camo for someone, one of the concerns that you might have is, oh, is that going to match with their camo? Or vice versa. It's like, well, I was gifted this item, but it doesn't match with my camo.
Olive drab goes with everything.
Well, all travel goes with everything, number one. But a lot of these like hiking and camping things that we're talking about go in underneath your kit, right? So you don't even have to worry about that. Like if you're gifting a base layer to someone, it could be blaze orange for all you care because it's going underneath their camo.
For sure. I mean, like my compression shirts are not exactly necessarily airsoft appropriate color wise, right? But they do the job fine. They're hidden under camo. Who cares?
Exactly.
One of my friends from fencing is like super into really like offensively loud, aesthetically rash guards because he does judo and jujitsu, and he just likes the sort of the loudness of them. But they're perfectly fine if you toss them under something for airsoft, no problem, right? Like it's non-issue. And I mean, ultimately, I think I will say that if you're thinking about getting people camo, there's some know your audience there, right? Like if you're dealing with someone who only ever wears multicam, then probably buying them camo if they already have sufficient multicam is probably unnecessary. But there are lots of us who are nerdy enough that just like, oh, that's a new kind of camo, wicked, right?
Another great one that comes out of this too is MREs, right? So if you know that someone is into airsoft, chances are that they will dig having an MRE in their kit at some point, right? Because they're a fun item to have. Now that doesn't mean that you have to go source like $150 like a French RCIR or whatever. Like, although a hint hint guys, if you want to get me something, if you get me a French RCIR, I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah,
But
mail your ration packs to Phil, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah, but those are generally pretty cool. And if you're looking at surplus stuff, those are generally pretty available depending which country you're in, etc. You can certainly find some, and most airsofters would pretty much dig, just the novelty of having that in their kit. I know I have over the years, like I have an affinity for MREs. There's no question. But even before I had that affinity as an airsofter, if you'd been like, "Hey, here's an MRE, stuff in your kit," I would have been like, "Yeah, okay, that's cool," right?
Totally. I mean, like, frankly, just being able to pull out an MRE at a game in the middle, in, one of the, like, the random lunch break or whatever, just, oh, I'm gonna have a snack, pull out an MRE is one of those things that people are always like, oh, that's rad. I've never ever seen a player not think that was just sort of interesting or fun.
Yeah, yeah,
I will totally steal your MRE pound cake, because that shit is delicious. But,
yeah,
you know, my questionable taste in food items notwithstanding, yeah, it's fun, and it also rolls right back to being that sort of creature comfort, right? Like, they're designed to be a compartmentalized, small, movable meal. Yes, with way more calories than you need for playing a day of airsoft, really, but like, they're designed so they don't suck. Like, they're designed to be an enjoyable eating experience. That's the whole point of them.
unless you're
Um,
eating the what is it, the maple flavored sausage patty that John and I had in our latest ration that were absolutely MRE stands for meal ready to eat. These were meals ready to expel. Like they were so disgusting.
I mean, the good news there is that since I have you guys to test things for me, I just will avoid those.
Yeah,
I have taste testers. It's a thing. But the point stands that, like, if you're out playing airsoft for, a full day or a multi-day thing, they're actually a pretty good food option. And for the calorie count and the portability and stuff, they're also not terribly unaffordable.
mhm.
You know, they're certainly more expensive than, like, oh, I'm gonna bring a sandwich. But in terms of what you're trying to fuel yourself up for the day with, they're probably also better than the sandwich.
Yeah. And if you think about like some of the more modern MREs, like I think about some of the Canadian Forces IMPs I've had in the last few months, like they all include um, like electrolyte beverages, like sports beverages and stuff, which are very helpful if you're sweating and you're exercising a lot in the day.
Yeah,
Uh,
they're great on those 30-degree days, right?
to-
And by the same token, the fact that they often have, or almost always have, some sort of hot food in them is fantastic in the winter or the fall here, where it's cooler.
yeah, the Canadian Forces ones, I mean, are a little backwards in that they, for some reason, issued the FRH, the flameless ration heaters, separate from the main rations, which kind of doesn't make
Huh.
sense because I mean, if anyone is going to need to heat up a ration, it's Canada because it's friggin' cold
Yeah,
here. But
yeah, that seems like a priority thing for us.
but like the US MREs, for example, are issued with the FRHs, and like you're absolutely right. Like it's great. My wife and I went camping. Sorry, we went hiking over the summer. We went up to Gold Mill, and I talked about it in the podcast. But when we got to the top, we had an FRH and so some food, and it was great because it was a very very cold day, and that was really the only source of heat that we had. So they're
Warm food and a hand warmer.
yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And when we left the top of the hill, we actually gave our FRH to another couple who were up there who were absolutely not prepared for the cold. Like they were just wearing t-shirts or whatever. I'm like, here, happy birthday, like use this to warm your hands or whatever till you get back down to the bottom. Um, but anyways, I digress. I think MREs are something fun that a lot of airsofters can enjoy, and if you have the ability to source one and give them as a gift, they're always really appreciated. No, no question. Now, I mean, you might not land on the best MRE in the world, but it's still fun to crack one open and see what's in
Well,
there.
and I mean, even if you're just sort of grabbing whatever you can get for $20, there's some joy to be had, I think, from MRE roulette. you know,
Oh,
like, there's the sausages may not have been a positive experience, but getting to try them and knowing what they taste like is still a fun thing to have done.
yeah, and there was other stuff in that MRE that wasn't garbage, right? Like there was a side in there that was probably fun. Like it was
It
probably
contains some food.
yeah, exactly, right? So it's like, oh, well, I don't like this main. Okay, well, what do I got? Sliced apples? Okay, well, that's fine. What do I got? I got a Tabasco packet. Okay, well, that's cool. Like, like there's stuff like that. So it's fun to do, to just dig through it and see what you get, right? Absolutely.
They're the box of chocolates of the airsoft hobby, right?
Yeah,
Is this
absolutely.
one of the good ones or one of the terrible ones?
Mhm.
um, you know, And I think other things that, work out well for gifts for airsofters, you know, most of the red dots I've used have been on the cheaper side. I would advise people against buying the EOTech clones in general because almost all of the ones I've had have been not very nice.
Yeah.
But I've definitely used a bunch of $40, three or four $40 optics. I think a couple of our guys are using, $40, like, I bought this on AliExpress and it is vaguely shaped like the optic I wanted. Cool.
Yeah.
Ones. And yeah, it's a red dot. It does the thing. So that's decent bang for your $40. You know, if you can get one that's not a shape of red dot sight that your teammate currently has, then oh man, they now have sort of a bit of configurable costuming for their airsoft gun, right? Because again, like Phil uses the SRS, I use an aim point style red dot. I don't actually think that I have a real preference between the two of them. I think might like the aim point slightly better because it's elevated and I'm a big dude. But beyond that tiny bit of ergonomics, like they're both a red dot. They put a dot on the target that I can use to aim. That's the goal. That is what I'm here for.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Like I think if you're looking at a $40 solution for, for airsoft purposes, then those absolutely do make good stocking stuffers as well. And like you said, the form factor is largely not going to be relevant. If you're looking for something that you can tune and you can, really adjust and stuff, $40 is not going to do it for you either way, right? My SRS was more expensive than that. I think your aim point was more expensive than that as well. But
Yeah, I think my aim point was probably about 60, but I also got it secondhand. So
yeah, yeah, totally, right. And so like that being said, if what you're trying to do is seeing, oh yeah, well, is this a good form factor for me? Like if it works, does it do the thing? Does it suit my need right now? And then you can, that's a good option that you can get as a gift. And I think as a corollary to that, another thing that I would highly recommend as a good gift is eye protection.
yeah, I mean, every single pair of goggles that anyone on our team wears that I can think of, other than Steph's paintball mask, was probably pretty expensive. Is available for around $40. Like you can buy all three pairs of goggles I own for about that much on the internet. Like
Yeah, like like a surplus secondhand kind of situation. And as long as it's properly rated, so like an ANSI rating, whatever, I don't believe you can have too much eye protection. Now, obviously, you can't wear more than one pair at a time. You might be like, well, how could I have too much? How can I have, like not have too much if I have two pairs? Well, you know what? There could be situations where you need spare eye pro. Maybe you just took a hit to the lens and it's compromised and you want to swap your eye pro out. Now you have a second pair. Maybe you have a friend who shows up for the game and he's not wearing full steel eye pro, Johnny, and you need to give it a pair of a full steel eye pro. Well, then you have some in your pack. And also, fundamentally, I think you may discover new makes and models that actually work better for you. But if you've got a pair of iPro that you're generally satisfied with that's doing the job, you're probably not going to go out there and buy another pair. But if someone gives you a set of NC goggles, what's to stop you from just trying that, right?
and I mean, I've got three sets. One of them I bought because it was to go over my glasses, and it was my primary set for ages. I've got a set of very small ESS ones that are what I use most of the time now, and I've got a set of sort of in between ones that I got for $20 ages ago. Just someone had bought like a lot of 150 and was selling them on Airsoft Canada for $20. um, and I've used all of them. I think I might have used all of them this summer
Yep.
because what's comfortable on any given day varies, and the kind of play we're engaging in varies. So, like, honestly, I'll wear the set that went over my goggles if I'm doing a lot of CQB because they cover like half of my face, and that's great. you know,
And you also have
um,
an opportunity where if you have two sets of goggles and you have them both in the field, if one starts to like really fog up really badly, you just swap to the other,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
And
Uh,
assuming they both work for you, obviously. And again, we've talked about this before. It's sometimes your goggles can be aiming and all this kind of stuff. So they're just
another,
recording. But
no, totally, another fantastic gift in that again, $40-$60 range is you can eBay, Amazon, AliExpress a cheap multifunction smart charger,
Yeah.
rather than using, just like a terrible Lipo just plug in and it beeps eventually charger. You'll get way more life out of your batteries. You will get just an entirely more positive experience out of dealing with that aspect of your gun, and with maintaining that aspect of your kit. People, like the number of players I know who have terrible cheap chargers who are just like, I should really do something about that, and then never do, because they bought a $5 one or a $15 one, or whatever the local shop had, and then they look at mine when I solder a new Dean's connector onto their battery or whatever, and go, man, that must have cost a lot of money. I'm like, no, it was $40. Like,
And like I have one of the Tenergy smart chargers that we got from our sponsorship, and it is a very expensive smart charger, but it's very good. It doesn't need to be that expensive. Prior to that, I was using one of the IMAX BA6C or whatever they're called. I think it's the same one that you use.
yep,
Not very expensive, but they're like miles ahead of just one of the plug-in wall chargers. That being said, if you're going to be gifting someone a smart charger, gift them some Lipo bags too. Lipo battery bags are the kind of item that every airsofter should have if they're using lipos. And despite that, they're not like a super cool guy item, but they can really make the difference
they're
between something going very wrong and you having a fire in your house, and something going very wrong and you not
they're
having any issue with
they're not super expensive. They're a buy once item unless you somehow lose them. And yeah, don't burn down your house.
it. You can get two of these bags off Amazon, $10 US. Like, I have two of those bags. They cost me $15 Canadian or something like that. There's a big one and the small one, and if the lipo were to catch fire in that, the bag will start smoking and smoldering, but will contain everything, and my house isn't going to burn, right? Unless
And
I happen to not be there and I'm not there for like weeks on end, et cetera, et cetera. They will give you the amount of time necessary for you to take preventative measures to make sure you actually don't have a fire in your house. If you're charging your batteries while you're not there, while your charger is in a closet somewhere or something of that nature, you're really setting yourself up for potential disaster. And ten
by
dollars
which he
can
means hello, us in university playing airsoft.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We didn't know any better then, but if you don't believe us, that's fine. Just go on Reddit and look at the Airsoft Reddit, and you can see pictures of people's like battery bags that are melted but didn't catch fire, and that should tell you everything you need to know about how useful
Yeah, no, I really just I love not having my house burned down. That it's an easy sell, and they don't cost very much. And looking at Christmas time, yeah, if you know someone who runs lipo batteries and doesn't have one, that's an easy option and not a terribly expensive one.
Just before we move on, I think one of the things you may want to think about avoiding in terms of gifts is stuff that requires fit. So like clothing or LBE, like load bearing equipment and stuff. That's a bit more tricky because, as you all know, airsoft sizing, like Asian knockoff airsoft stuff sizing, is all sort of very weird and random and doesn't really mean a whole lot. And so if you're buying someone something on your list and you're like, oh, well, he wears a large t-shirt, so I'm going to get him a large BDU, that may or may not really work to your advantage. If you're buying surplus equipment, that's certainly one thing. But if you're buying like airsoft equipment, it's probably not going to do it for you. So I
Let the
personally
buyer beware.
yeah, I would personally recommend avoid that kind of gift. Again, unless you're offering them like a cool camo or surplus item or something like that. Most of the time, you're better off sticking to some of the other stuff.
And if you are trying to get someone that sort of gift, and their family, cheat.
Yeah,
Right? Like I'm reasonably sure that it would not be super hard for me to find out what shirt size anyone on my airsoft team wears, because I also know all of their, wives, partners, whatever, right?
yeah.
And that definitely helps. But lacking that, yeah, maybe pass on the camo. Or if you really want to get a camo item, my father really likes poking at surplus stores and like airsoft stores, which is funny because like I don't remember the at least it being as much of a thing before I got into airsoft, and he became aware that like there was a wide variety of all of this stuff that you could buy for not very much money, and he sort of every now and then he'll be like, hey, I bought a boonie in this weird camo and it's funny, and I've ended up with a couple of them. It's great. But yeah, I buy a boonie, buy a hat. They're again super cheap. They mail for super cheap because they just stuff them in an envelope for you. And I definitely have 3 or 4 boonie hats, and man, honestly, they're super super good for playing in. Yeah, they're not stylish. There's no style to them whatsoever other than the I'm wearing a boonie hat har har style. um, but they're super comfortable. They keep the sun off your neck. They keep the sun out of your eyes. And I mean, admitting that I'm the sort of guy who is totally down to give people goofy presents.
Sticking with the uniform theme, I think there's another thing that you can gift that makes a really good gift is patches. I think now, let me be very clear. I really hate morale patches. I think they're personally, I do not enjoy it. I've been given my fair share of morale patches. I've bought a fair share of morale patches for myself. And in retrospect, I'm like, ah, that's so cringe. But morale patches can be really fun if you know the player you're buying them for. They can really bring a lot of uniqueness to that person's kit. I know, for example, Steph wears a Mega Man patch, Pat, you wear a Dragon patch. Like those kinds of stuff can be unique and they can be fun. So that's one way that you can give a gift. But more than that too, I would really recommend custom patches. If it's within your budget, get someone a patch with their name on it. Right? We often talk about wearing your own name on your kit because it makes you more approachable as a player. Um, and so consequently, I mean, that's something you can sort of quote unquote bankroll for someone, right? Buy them a patch with their name on it. Buy them a patch with their country's flag on it, right? Something like that. That can be a really good stocking stuff.
Name tape patches are way cheaper than you think they are too. Like, you know, um, you can get an okay one done up for like $10, especially if you live in the right places. Like we pay more to ship everything here, so we pay kind of a premium for that sort of novelty. But if you live in the States, 20-25 bucks for a fancy one, right? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's the kind of item that many people may not consider getting for themselves, especially if it's like a one time like, oh, am I really gonna spend $80 on patches for myself? I've done that, but that's something that I chose to do at that particular time. And I'm saying that out loud because my wife is not in the room while I'm recording. Um, but to
Keeps them
be
out of
honest,
trouble.
well, I mean, hey, but to be honest, like spending $20 on the name tape or something like that, on a cool patch with someone's name and a flag, or like all these things are available online and they're not that expensive, and it's custom, and people love to have kit that sort of is custom and sort of stands them out from everybody else. So that's a really really good option when it comes to uniform, rather than trying to find a camo or whatever. If you're gonna pick something olive drab, please olive drab.
Yeah, it's as we've already said, olive drab goes with everything. Um, if you're gonna go for the morale patch route, yeah, aim for things that people will find fun or funny, or like I've the dragon one. I've got a big Viking one that I sometimes wear. Um, you know that sort of thing is definitely up my alley.
And I would say too, and I think just sticking with the morale patch theme, there are a lot of morale patches out there that are pretty offensive. They are meant and they are intended by people wearing them overseas in situations that are very different from us playing airsoft. And I would suggest that they're not as cool as you think they are. Wearing patches that are offensive to someone's culture or someone's religion or what have you is not as cool as you think it is. So I would highly avoid those. Highly recommend that you avoid those and stick to stuff that is just actually legit funny, or just airsoft quirky. And there's a lot of airsoft morale directly airsoft related morale patches, whether they're meme patches or whatever, and like cheeseburger operator patches and all this kind of stuff. And those
That
are
one speaks
probably
to me.
more your best bang for your buck when it comes to appropriate
Yeah,
morale to be sporting.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in general, avoiding the offensive morale patches is a good play. Not to get preachy about it, but yeah, um, stick to funny stuff, right? Keep the because you can absolutely buy like morale patches with racist humor and stuff on them. That's you might think you're being like edgy or funny in a way, but that doesn't really have any place in airsoft,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, like my tactical Viking patch is I think humorous enough that I'm good with it. The beer can grip patches are pretty good. Things like that. If you're old
His
enough to drink
shuttle
wherever you
port
are.
gunner is one of my favorite.
Yeah,
Hey,
right. Like just silly, and in a way that's not gonna upset anyone, which is really the go-to, I think.
so let me ask you, Pat, what is the best airsoft related Christmas gift that you've gotten over the years?
Um, when we just started playing, you bought me the first sling that I used, and I used it for like 10 years. So that's got to have some pretty high rating from me.
I swear I did not know that that was going to be the answer when I asked
You
the
know,
question.
um, just because it's indestructible or was. It has a new home now because we've switched to the sort of the 2 point slings. But that was a really excellent piece of kit, and I used it every game for ages. The stuff you gave me, the meal like ration tray and stuff for my World War II kit was super awesome. I'm sort of I'm not trying to kiss ass or anything really, even if it does sort of sound like that. But like I only sort of count it as airsoft because it's also sort of history nerd stuff. um, but I love it and it's super nerdy and I enjoy it a lot. So that definitely goes in there. Yeah. And I really do think that those are probably the top two. Because just one of them was a really comfortable piece of gear that I used forever. And the other one, is a little bit more into the nerdy memes and dreams side of my airsoft stuff. But it's really excellent. What about yourself?
That was a good sling though. Like I gotta say, like even though we don't use it anymore, like that was a great friggin' sling.
Absolutely. Like
Yeah.
it, and I've carried everything on it that you can carry on a sling. Like
Mm.
I'm reasonably sure I put a saw on that single point and it wasn't too uncomfortable, and that's pretty
Yeah.
good, right? Like,
I think for myself, one of the ones that I have the most fun. I mean, it's got to be that M72 law that you guys gave me. Like many years ago, the guys I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, but the team got together and they ordered me an M72 law, and it's like a propane powered or no CO2 powered like grenade like
it runs off a 203 shell, so
yeah
whatever you got.
BB
Um,
shower, and it's absolutely garbage like in terms of like utility on the field, but it's so cool. Like it's so cool. Like the tube expands and you hit the button and it's a big thump and it's complete garbage. Like you're not hitting anything with that. Uh, but
yeah,
it's such a cool piece of kit, and it's been living in Chris's basement now for a few years because we've just set up sort of like that studio down there for a while. It used to be on my mantle. It's going to be it'll have a place of honor in the new studio once we move into the new place. But
it's
yeah,
also it's just such a good airsoft like cosplay piece, like photo prop. And yeah, like it's a laugh, right?
it's funny. One of the best Christmas gifts that I've had is actually from you, Pat, and it's most memorable, and it's one that really has never seen the airsoft field in any real practical use. But it's a cold steel tomahawk. Like it's got like
Tactical axe, baby.
yeah, it's got like a full haft and like a head and a spike on the back. Like you could legit kill someone with that, no problem. Uh,
It does look like it was designed for that purpose. Yeah.
that's quite literally what it was designed for. Now I've taken it to the airsoft field and like shown it around as a piece. I'd never, ever, ever would carry it because it's not like it's not even something you could just put on your kit and carry around. Like it's huge. Like the haft of it is like 2.5, 3 feet long.
and,
In
and
addition,
you're at risk of also jamming the biggest big old spike into yourself.
no, it's just it's savage. But
Oh.
it's so cool, and it's still well, obviously all my stuff is packed up right now because we're moving, but like it's still it was on my pegboard right next to all my guns and stuff because it was just awesome. Again, would I ever use that in the context of airsoft? No, of
I,
course not. That's
it
it's a weapon,
it's got
but
to be straight up one of the least useful gifts I've ever given you, but it
yeah,
is so metal.
yeah, and it's awesome, man. Like can you chop wood with it? No, because you're gonna stab yourself with the spike on the backside of that axe. Like it's got like no use, but it's so cool. Uh,
Yep. No, it's good like that, man. I love it.
yeah,
Um, yeah, Dad's given me a couple of knives, like combat knives, over the last, you know, well, since I started playing airsoft, really. That have been I have a couple that are very big that have been features of my kit, but have ended up sort of being left on the shelf more and more because I don't need a giant knife at airsoft. But year before last, he gave me a sort of like, I think it's a 3-inch blade SOG seal pup, I think. And it's exactly the right size for bringing to airsoft. And I've managed to resist the terrible urge to like put it onto my shoulder panel on my vest because it's just no reason to be at it, as funny as it is.
previous to
But
that, you used to carry a K bar, right?
yeah, I still have a K bar Tonto. I've got a huge Columbia River Knife Company kukri that I have worn to airsoft games because I forgot it was on my belt and left it there when I got to the field because it was funny. Um,
Yeah,
I bought it to replace my camping hatchet was old and just not in good shape, and I was like, well, it'll do the same job as the hatchet, and it costs about the same amount as a good one, and it's way funnier. um, so like I consider that money well spent, and it technically does live in the box with my airsoft gear because I don't know where else I'd put a gigantic kukri really. But it's definitely completely impractical. But the SOG knife it's a really great little camp knife, and it's most of the stuff that I use a knife for at airsoft has been either like cutting a piece of rope off to do something stunned with, or like cutting a tree branch off and whittling it or whatever. So it's exactly the right size for that sort of usage. I guess I should also give a huge shout out to, and this is a great Christmas gift item. I think it's in the $100 range, so it's a little on the more expensive side. But my Leatherman is a fantastically useful thing all of the time, but especially for airsoft.
yeah. I mean, multi
Yeah,
tools are
I
just
have
outstanding as a kid. Yeah,
I have put on so many motor leads that had just popped off during a game with just the multi tool, that I can't say enough good things about owning one in general. I I have assembled beds with my Leatherman. Like it's just one of those things that I've used for a silly number of things. But yeah, and it's definitely an airsoft adjacent item to me. It I'm a teacher. I'm not allowed to wear a pocket or carry a pocket knife at work, which is silly, but there you go. So it does spend most of its time in my airsoft kit these days. Really, like that's definitely the thing I use the Leatherman the most for. And like I think any airsofter is probably also the kind of person who will enjoy a good multi tool.
and I think we said it before. Having a multi tool when you're a kid, you can't really go wrong. Like it's just something that most airsofters should be carrying. Um, but you just jogged my memory as to one of the gifts that you had given me many years ago, which is the Duke Duke, which is a French Foreign Legion, historically a French Foreign Legion knife. It's made out of like basically metal, and it's not really like meant to be great quality. That being said, It's very thin metal, and if there's one thing very thin metal is good at, is getting very sharp.
Oh yeah, you can definitely sharpen those knives up really really well. They won't hold an edge super long,
No,
but like
but
you
they
can
get
get it.
very sharp. And ask me how I know. Um, but it's that was a cool, just a cool gift. Just because again, like it's the kind of thing that any airsofter who has particular interest, like I mean, I'm French, I'm interested in the French Foreign Legion. Like you give that someone, you're like, oh yeah, this is a piece of history. It's cool. It's interesting. Does it fit in your airsoft kit? Like not to carry. Like it doesn't fit with the aesthetic of like my modern day fighting kit. But does it fit in my bag and does it come out useful? Like hell yeah, it does. Right?
And like I know it has often like lived on your desk and stuff, and it's that one especially is it's an interesting looking knife. It's a conversation piece, right?
Totally. Yeah.
And so like added bonus to giving you something you would enjoy is also something that allows you to talk about and nerd out about the French Foreign Legion, which is something you find really cool and interesting. And so you get to talk about that. I get to hear about it. Other people get to hear about it. You get to learn about that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, guys, we know that Christmas is coming up for us. It's Christmas for many of you. It could be Hanukkah or
Yule,
variety.
Kwanzaa, whatever you
Yeah,
got.
Kwanzaa exactly, depending on what exactly you celebrate. And
Pat is open minded. If your holiday involves eating, I'm in.
totally eating and spending time with your loved ones, which is really what this time of year is all about. Um, that's really all we have for you this week. We will be back with you next week as well with a new podcast. That being said, as we always encourage you to do, come find us on Discord. We have some great conversations there. Lots of different people from all around the world who celebrate all kinds of different holidays, have very different airsoft customs, and can encourage you to join any more than we already have. The link is in the description. Please come and join us. I think you'll find a really good place there. But until that time, that's all we've got for you guys. All right, take care, everyone.